They say hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, but they never mention the chilling calm of a woman systematically dismantling the lives of those who tried to destroy hers. He didn't just take my husband. She, Marta, with her saccharine smiles, and predatory ambition colluded with him, Kent, to bleed dry the very foundation of our life, our shared dreams, our future, all siphoned from our joint account to the tune of $150,000. They thought I'd crumble. They thought I'd weep silently into my pillow. They were wrong. I became the architect of their ruin, broadcasting their treachery from the digital rooftops of social media to the sterile corridors of their corporate ambition, ensuring that the inferno of their betrayal consumed them both, right down to their careers and her own sham of a marriage. Our life, Kent's and mine, hadn't always been a battleground waiting for a spark. For 12 years, it had been a tapestry woven with laughter, shared ambitions, and the comforting rhythm of a partnership I believed was unshakable. We'd met young, two bright-eyed hopefuls in a bustling Chicago, him a junior architect with a sketchbook full of dreams, me a fledgling graphic designer with a passion for bringing ideas to life. Our love story was conventional, perhaps, but it was ours. We built a home, not just the physical structure of our cozy two-bedroom condo, overlooking a sliver of Lake Michigan, but a sanctuary of trust and mutual respect. The $150,000 nestled in our joint savings account was a testament to that shared journey, years of diligent saving, a down payment for the larger house we dreamed of, the one with a yard for the golden retriever we always talked about getting. It was our future, tangible and secure. Then Marta slithered into Kent's professional life. She joined his architectural firm, Urbanscapes Inc., as a project manager about a year ago. At first, she was just a name Kent mentioned, part of the usual office chatter. "Marta's really sharp," he'd say, or "Marta and I nailed that presentation today." I, Ashley, being a supportive wife, would nod and smile, pleased he had competent colleagues. I even met her a couple of times at dreary office parties. She was all polished professionalism on the surface, sleek blonde bob, impeccably tailored suits, a handshake that was firm, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. There was an intensity about her, a hunger that I subconsciously registered, but consciously dismissed. After all, Kent loved me. We were solid. The first crack in our foundation was almost imperceptible. Kent started working later. "Big project," he'd murmur, already halfway out the door, a quick peck on my cheek replacing the lingering kisses we used to share. Then came the hushed phone calls, the way he'd angle his body away from me, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper if I walked into the room. Our conversations, once vibrant and engaging, became stilted, punctuated by his distracted scrolling on his phone. The laughter faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that screamed louder than any argument. His interest in me, in us, dwindled to a flicker. Intimacy became a memory. My attempts to connect, to understand what was happening, were met with defensive remarks or weary sighs. "You're imagining things, Ash," he'd say, his eyes avoiding mine. "I'm just stressed with work." But my gut, that primal instinct women are so often told to ignore, was churning. I started feeling like a ghost in my own home, my presence tolerated rather than cherished. The man I married was disappearing, replaced by a distant, irritable stranger who shared my bed but not my life. The red flags were no longer subtle. They were giant crimson banners flapping mockingly in my face. One Saturday, while Kent was supposedly at an urgent office meeting, a sickening premonition led me to his laptop, which he'd carelessly left open on his desk. I knew his password. We'd always believed in transparency. My fingers trembled as I navigated to his email. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drummer heralding a disaster I wasn't sure I could survive. There they were. Emails. Exchanged between kkenturbanscapes.com and emmamartaurbanscapes.com. It wasn't just project discussions. Interspersed between meeting minutes and design drafts were messages dripping with illicit affection, inside jokes, and clandestine plans. "Can't wait to see you tonight," one from Marta read, time-stamped from a day Kent told me he was working late on a solo deadline. "Last night was incredible," Kent had replied to another. Each word was a shard of glass piercing my heart. There were photos, too. Selfies of them, close, intimate, at bars I didn't recognize. Even one that looked like it was taken in a hotel room. Kent's arm around Marta's shoulder, her head nestled against his chest, both beaming with a happiness that was stolen from me. The world tilted on its axis. The air was sucked from my lungs. Betrayal is a cold, hollow word until you feel its icy grip around your soul. But the emails were just the prelude to the real horror. Driven by a desperate need to know the full extent of the devastation, logged into our joint bank account. The balance displayed on the screen made me gasp. $1,735.22. It was supposed to be over $150,000. Frantically, I clicked through the transaction history. Large withdrawals systematically made over the past 3 months. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. The dates corresponded with Kent's increasingly distant behavior, with the timeline of the affair illuminated by their emails. They hadn't just stolen my husband. They had plundered our future, our security, everything we had built together. The $150,000 was gone. A strange calm descended upon me then, the kind that precedes a storm. The tears didn't come. Instead, a cold, hard fury solidified in my veins. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my love for weakness, my trust for naivety. Kent, the man I had loved and trusted implicitly, had not only shattered my heart but had also conspired with his paramour to leave me financially destitute. Marta, the ambitious co-worker, was not just an adulteress but a thief. They thought they could just erase me and walk away with everything. They were about to find out how wrong they were. My grief was still there, a gaping wound, but now it was edged with steel. I wouldn't just survive this. I would ensure they faced the consequences of their despicable actions. The fight for Ashley had begun. The next few days were a blur of meticulous planning. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. Fueled by coffee and a burning sense of injustice, I became a detective in my own life. I downloaded every incriminating email, every suggestive text message I could find on his synced devices, every damning photograph. I took screenshots of the bank statements, highlighting the withdrawals, the dates, the destination account which, with a little online sleuthing of publicly available information, I suspected belonged to Marta, or was a new account they controlled. The evidence was irrefutable, a comprehensive portfolio of their deceit. My first act of war was digital. I crafted a post for social media, Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn for a professional sting. It wasn't a hysterical rant. It was cold, factual, and devastating. I laid out the truth, the affair, the calculated depletion of our joint savings, the names of the culprits, Kent and Marta. I attached a few key pieces of evidence, a particularly damning email exchange, redacting overly personal details not relevant to their treachery, but keeping the incriminating parts, and a summary of the bank withdrawals. I tagged them both. I made the post public. Before I hit share, my finger hovered for a moment. This was a point of no return. But the thought of their smug faces, their belief that they had gotten away with it, propelled me forward. I clicked. The explosion was instantaneous. Likes, shares, comments flooded in. Shock, outrage, sympathy for me, and utter condemnation for Kent and Marta. Friends, family, acquaintances, even strangers weighed in. Their carefully curated online personas crumbled in minutes. The digital scarlet letter was branded. Simultaneously, I composed an email to the Human Resources Department of Urbanscapes, Inc., CCing Kent's direct supervisor and the CEO, Mr. Harrison, a man known for his rigid adherence to ethical conduct. The subject line was blunt. Formal complaint regarding unethical conduct and financial impropriety by employees Kent, last name, and Marta, last name. In the email, I laid out the facts of the affair, emphasizing how it had progressed to a ETC conspiracy to defraud me of our joint marital assets. I attached the same damning evidence I had used on social media, plus a more detailed breakdown of the financial transactions. I pointed out that such behavior not only reflected poorly on the individuals, but could also bring the company's reputation into disrepute, especially if clients or the wider business community became aware of employees engaging in such deceitful acts. I suggested that their collaboration on financial theft indicated a profound lack of integrity that should be concerning for an employer. The corporate gears, once set in motion, ground swiftly. Within hours of my email, I received a concerned reply from HR, assuring me they were taking the matter very seriously and launching an internal investigation. The fallout for Kent was immediate. He came home that evening, not to the triumphant life he envisioned with Marta, but to a firestorm. His phone was blowing up with notifications from the social media posts. His face was ashen. "Ashley, what have you done?" he stammered, a pathetic caricature of the confident man I once knew. "Me?" I replied, my voice devoid of the tremor I felt inside. "I simply brought the truth to light, Kent. Your truth. The one you and Marta so carefully constructed behind my back." He tried to argue, to justify, to gaslight, but the evidence was too overwhelming. The man who had belittled my concerns and dismissed my pain now stood before me, exposed and pathetic. The next morning, he was summoned to HR. By lunchtime, he was unemployed. Urbanscapes Inc. did not tolerate gross misconduct, and a brewing scandal involving financial deceit tied to an office affair was more than enough. His access cards were deactivated, his belongings boxed up. The career he had spent years building was in tatters. Marta's fate was no different. The HR investigation, spurred by my comprehensive evidence, found her equally culpable, not just for the affair, but for her willing participation in the financial deception. While office romances weren't explicitly banned, the scandalous nature, coupled with the clear evidence of bad character demonstrated by the theft from me, made her position untenable. She too was fired within 2 days, her ambition crashing spectacularly around her. The whispers in the office corridors I later heard from a former colleague of Kent's who reached out to offer support were brutal. Marta, the rising star, became a pariah. But my quest for justice wasn't complete. Marta had a husband, a man named Liam. From her social media, before she hastily deactivated her accounts, I knew he existed, though he seemed like a background character in her ambitious life. He deserved to know the kind of woman he was married to. With a heavy heart, because I knew the pain this revelation would cause another innocent party, but with a resolve that this needed to be done, I found his contact details. I sent him a carefully worded message, concise and factual, explaining what his wife and my husband had done and offering to share the evidence. Liam responded within an hour, his shock palpable even through text. We met for coffee a few days later in a quiet, neutral cafe. He was a kind man with gentle eyes that now held a universe of pain. He listened as I recounted the story, his face growing paler with each detail. I showed him the emails, the photos, the bank statements. The evidence of Marta's betrayal was undeniable. He thanked me, his voice hoarse with emotion, for having the courage to tell him. The final pieces of their self-destructed empire fell into place shortly after. Liam, armed with the truth, filed for divorce from Marta. She was now not only jobless and a social outcast, but also facing the dissolution of her own marriage, a consequence of the life she had tried to build on the wreckage of mine. The $150,000 was still a gaping hole. I initiated legal proceedings to try and recover what I could, a long and arduous process. The divorce from Kent would be acrimonious, I knew, but he had little leverage left. His earning potential had plummeted, and his infidelity and financial misconduct were clearly documented. In the weeks and months that followed, I began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. The condo felt too large, too quiet, filled with too many ghosts, but it was mine. I started therapy to unpack the trauma, to heal the deep wounds Kent and Marta had inflicted. Some days were harder than others. The grief would wash over me in unexpected waves. But with each passing day, Ashley, the victim, began to fade, replaced by Ashley, the survivor. I never set out to be a vengeful woman. I set out to reclaim my dignity, my security, and my life. Kent and Marta had made their choices fueled by selfishness and deceit. They had built a fantasy on lies, and like all such structures, it was destined to collapse. I merely provided the tremor that brought it crashing down, Karma, I learned, isn't always a mystical force. Sometimes it's just the logical consequence of one's own actions, delivered with a steady hand. They had belittled me, betrayed me, and tried to erase me. Instead, they erased themselves from the life they knew. Their downfall a stark testament to the fact that you cannot build your happiness on someone else's ruin. My revenge wasn't a raging fire. It was a cold, calculated demolition, and from the rubble I would rise.